And this is what the Association for the Study of Peak Oil, ASPO, says, and British Petroleum. There are still reserves of around 1,000 billion barrels, but nobody knows exactly how much it are. And this is an advertisement of Chevron in the Financial Times a couple of years ago, saying that it took us 125 years to use the first trillion barrels of oil. We'll use the next trillion in 30. That is a tendency. We have still a trillion barrels of oil, but we'll use it in 30 years and not in 125. In 30 years, that's one generation only, and then it's over. Then we have to find some other solution for the energy problem that is inevitable. Inevitable. Well, that there are conflicts on scarce resources is quite understandable. I will not touch upon this because it is too much. But on the other hand, there are also the problems of combustion, because when you take energy into account, you always have to think in this energy chain. What happens with energy from the source to the disposal, to the emissions, and all these different stages of the energy chain are points of high conflicts, and the problem is that it is inevitable that greenhouse gases are produced with the effects on climate because of the carbon cycle, which is very important to take into consideration. How is it possible to store carbon again? And as we know, today it is very hard and perhaps impossible to store it again, so that we have the storage in the atmosphere, and that means heating of the mean temperature of the Earth up to 5 to 6 degrees, and that would have a disastrous effect on on all human and other life. This is the result also of many reports by the IPCC, the International Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change in the United Nations institution, or this is the argument of the so-called Stern review made by Nicholas Stern, a former World Bank economist, and he made this report for the British government under Blair 2006, saying more or less the following one. We produce greenhouse gases. This means that the average temperature increases at least 2 degrees Celsius, but probably more than 2, up to 5 to 6 degrees Celsius until the end of this century. This has consequences, the melting of glaciers and the shrinking of living spaces and the increase of the sea level and all that, what you well know. These effects have secondary effects, floods and salination of soils, groundwater is salinated, and so on and so forth. And then Stern added a third level, and that is what made the report so famous in international debates. He said that is very expensive for us. It costs us 20% of global GDP. That is, when we do not stop the greenhouse effect, then we will be 20% less rich than we could be. And that is much more than what are the losses of the financial crisis up to now. So we see there is not only the financial crisis, there's also an ecological crisis threatening, which also has a monetary effect, which is much more serious than that of the financial crisis. And it has not only a monetary effect. That is very hard, these monetary losses. People become poorer. but monetary losses are reversible. But the losses of species because of the changes in living conditions of living beings, not only of human beings, of living beings, and the impact on evolution, that is irreversible. And we have to be very, very careful with these changes, much more than with the financial crisis. That is what I wanted to say. Well, and Stern has a positive message saying that when we invest 1% of global GDP, then we can avoid these losses of 20%. It's a good deal which we can make, but we must make it today and immediately and not in 10 years or so. And therefore it doesn't happen to now. Well, I will not deal with all these other issues and only drawing the conclusion that it is necessary, therefore, to change the energy regime. It can only be a regime of renewable energy, but I say 3 times but, it is not without problems. And there is no simple solution to the fossil energy crisis because biomass is not available in an unlimited measure. And when you use it for feeding our cars, then you cannot feed the stomach, the mouth of hungry people. So there is a trade-off implied, and we have to be very careful how we use the renewable energies. And possibly, and that is what I wanted to give as a message, possibly we not only have to exchange the energy source, substitute renewable energy for fossil energy, but we have to change also the use of energy. And therefore we have to consider the way in which we produce, in which we live, in which we consume, in which we organize our mobility, our daily living, and so on and so forth. And that is the reason why we have to discuss also the question of isn't it possible to follow the path of a so-called solidarity economy. This is an experience already in the long history of capitalism. There was also not only the formal industrial sector and its development, but there was always, besides the formal economy, a so-called moral economy. And who coined this word moral economy was the historian E.P. Thompson, who said always in history of capitalism there was not only the formal labor and the formal economy, but also moral economy of communities, of people who tried to sustainably produce, and so on and so forth.